Così è meglio. Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to the Istituto Affari Internazionali. It's a real pleasure and a real honor to host this meeting together with the Embassy of Lithuania, to host Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis, a good friend, one of actually the greatest minds, I must say. And I'm not, saying it because you're a friend. I'm saying it because I actually believe it. In I think Europe and European foreign policy today. So I'm absolutely delighted to have you, Gabrielius, here with you. And what we wanted to do actually today is really to sort of take this opportunity to kind of go around the world with you. Initially, of course, when this meeting was first conceived, I think what was mainly preoccupying us was, and obviously remains to a very large extent, Ukraine. And Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we're at a stage in which I think, probably beyond expectations, our unity has held. I remember back already in the summer of 2022, only after a few months of the war, that people had started saying, is there a division between the so-called peace and justice camp, and is there going to be a division in Europe? And not to be complacent about it, I actually think that it's really quite not only important but impressive that that division actually hasn't emerged yet. Which, of course, does not mean to say that it won't, and it does not mean to say that the so-called fatigue effect is not going to kick in. Anyway, Ukraine is, I think, a case in which the discussion to a large extent revolves around how do we keep, it's about staying power. We know what we want. We know how to achieve it. Do we have what it takes to actually engage in what, not out of our will, but out of reality, is a long war? Then you kind of, and I think sort of so long as that was the story, I don't know what you think, but my personal sense was, actually the EU is not doing that badly after all. And, there has been a strategic awakening of sorts, militarily and energy terms. That unity has held, so of course we could be doing a lot better, but on a whole, not bad. And all of a sudden, I think, over the last few months, not just over the last 6 days, we gradually started waking up to another reality, which was always there. And I think to an extent, we pretended it wasn't there. And of course, it started with essentially what has been, to all extents and purposes, a total failure of a European approach to the Sahel. Yes, of course, there's a specific French angle to this, but it is about Europe. And we don't really know what to do. We assumed that in the Middle East, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was kind of gone, that a stabilization could somehow be achieved, on the one hand, internally through overwhelming Israeli force, and externally through a normalization of Israel's relations with Arab countries, particularly Arab Gulf countries, which of course would have been crowned with an Israeli-Saudi normalization. Never, in a sense, buying into, assuming that rather than that being a sideshow, to the extent that there was never a conflict between Israel and Saudi Arabia, it was the main show. And we kind of believe this. I don't know whether consciously or unconsciously, but all of a sudden, again, another real manifestation of failure. All this happening in that broader global context of a US-China competition. How does Europe fit in this? But also, I would say, because I think it connects all of these sort of dots, the whole question of Europe and the so-called global South, right? In which I think there's a real risk that at the moment we're running, in which, as we know, how did Ukraine change the terms of the debate on the global South? Well, basically it made us realize that not everyone kind of automatically agreed with us, right? And of course it was always the case, but it was that rude wake up. Of course, the risk of what's happening now in the Middle East is that it will further confirm those resentments and that perception of our double standards and our bias and all the rest of it. So in all of this, I think, in really a matter of very short time, we've kind of moved from a tough but relatively optimistic story about Europe's role in the world into a fairly tragic one. So I guess, in your run around the world, how do you see this? And above all, given that, unlike me, you've got to do something about it, what should we do about it?
Thank you so much. Indeed, it's a great pleasure to be here. That's a very heavy task to overview the current situation globally. I don't think that anybody has a very good vantage point to do that. But I would try to define a couple of points that I think that extremely important that we've been trying to work on during the last, not just, as you say, a couple of days, months, but probably since the beginning of the war against Ukraine. So I would start that one of the main arguments that we were trying to push through was that how pivotal is Russia's war against Ukraine. That it's a global change event. This is an event that in 100 years, we might look back and say, this is where it began. And I know it sounds subjective from a representative from a country that faces Russia on its borders. Belarus is one of the main countries assisting Ukraine. But I think that there is a huge argument in this. We have, if we look back since 1990s, after the fall of Soviet Union and the event that we call fall of Berlin Wall, Russia was trying to figure out its way in the global society, what kind of actor it is. And there have been moments, I would say probably the moments of biggest hope, 95, before the first Chechen war, where Russia was, with Yeltsin in lead, was trying to portray or find a seat as a responsible partner. The country that has world's interests in mind, where the stability would matter for their well-being, for their people's well-being. In many cases, it would find itself in a contradiction to West interests. That's understandable, probably, but still as a stabilizing player. And starting with 2008, 2014, now this role is completely gone. Russia is no longer in any means, in any ways, interested in world stability. And since it's a rather black or white situation, meaning that they are on the opposite side, they would foster instabilities anywhere they happen, because in that sense, it helps them push their agenda in Ukraine. In turn, it helps them stabilize their mandate for the governing of the country. I mean, for the elite in the country. So Russia's war, that's, the last phase of the war that started in 2022, is a pivotal world-changing event. I was thinking about, there is a book called Sleepwalkers about the First World War, which basically says that everybody who's saying that the war started in Serbia in 1914, they're wrong, because it started way back, and you can trace back. Obviously, it's a bit. I mean, you can have many arguments. Like when did the fall of Roman Republic began? Somebody says that 200 BC with the fall of Carthage. This was where it all began, right? And from then on. But I would think that in major events in the world, you can trace back where did it all begin. And I would think that this is where our issues might start from. That's why we are so adamantly believe that winning in Ukraine, for Ukrainians, obviously, it is so important for the global stabilization, because it will push back on Russia's chaotic agenda, show that it does not play out, and probably that would lead to some sort of a stabilization. Because what we're seeing, you mentioned Sahel, obviously it has to be mentioned, the situation in Israel and Palestine. We cannot forget, just a couple of weeks old events in Nagorno-Karabakh. You can imagine Nagorno-Karabakh could have happened last year. It could have happened next year. It happened now.
Right. Not a coincidence.
Yeah, I don't think that it's a coincidence. I think that there's a chain of events that do not necessarily hint on planning. I'm not that deep in conspiracy theory, but that they assist one another. They divide our attention, and with the divided attention, it helps push Russia's agenda because they're all so focused on one item that they need to happen. So with everything happening, with all the instabilities, we still have to trace back, because we're still not in a historic period. It's still politics. It's still decision-making time. We still need to trace back politically into Ukraine and help Ukraine win, plug that hole, and then figure the rest. If we fail to do that, if every new instability point drives our new agenda, if our politics are driven by the headlines of current day, not by the multitude of events and the chain of events where we trace back to the first event, then we would just breed a new instability that would probably lead at the worst case scenario into the collapse of really a collapse of world rules-based order that we currently have. So this is a dangerous situation where we are at. I know that it is seen like that by many, but usually democratic politics drives our answers. But we need to keep talking about the way it all started. Now you have a question about Europe. Again, if we go back, I would probably say that events of 2004 were the mistakes of 2008. The events in 2000, the first attack on Ukraine was a mistake of letting Russia go in Georgia. Letting Russia go in Georgia was the whole strategy of building the relationship with Russia with no strings attached, with no mentioning, building a coalition that was based on transaction rather than values. And that gave a hint to Russia that they would be let go if they do something like that in Georgia. And they were let go. That led to 2014. And now 2022. And yes, we can be proud about our answer to 2022, because it was the first time that Europe understood, the European Union understood that it's about us. It directly affects us. It directly affects our security. And if we cannot handle this, is there anything that we can handle? Yes, we depend on transatlantic unity on this one, but no matter where it leads, this is happening on European soil, with so many countries in Europe directly affected. Not even talking about global implications, but directly affected. So yes, we managed, but we have to admit that it was we did not manage in the past, and that's why we have this situation. In 2014, it was very obvious. It was extremely obvious with Minsk agreements, with a slap on the wrist for Russia. Basically, we let go Russia with an invasion, a full-scale invasion. Not full-scale, but invasion of the country, annexation of territories, because we did not have a strategy. So now we are a bit in the same situation when it comes to different other scenarios, because I would believe that in Europe, we've seen us as definitely not as a geopolitical unit, more of a castle that is mostly worried about migration. If we can solve that, everything should be fine. We did not talk about enlargement, really. We did not talk about our, own security capabilities, about our strategy towards Northern Africa, let alone Sahel, and so many other things, because we are a castle on a high hill, and we're doing quite fine. We have social issues that we need to solve that require our biggest attention, but not foreign issues, not foreign affairs issues, not geopolitical issues. And I think that from this mindset, 2014 comes from, and then the whole situation where we are currently. This has to change. This has to change, and my absolute, view is that Sahel is about us. It will affect. It already is affecting us in a similar way that Ukraine is affecting us. Different, but I mean the implications would be in that direction. Middle East, definitely. And now, what is our strategy? That is the main question that is not yet being answered. The easiest way to answer it, but it will sound just might sound a little bit too vague, is that we need actually to be geopolitical in this, and to understand that Europe does not end where the last European flag on the border post is flown. We have to have a strategy for others, and it has to be geopolitical. It has to have instruments, multiple instruments of how do we deal with issues. What is our policy? Because if we won't have a policy will be formed either whether we like it or not, and we will have to just to take it and live with it. So last sentence is that I'm hoping that this will be the time of awakening, not just in case of Ukraine, but for Europe as a geopolitical power, because if not, then we're in very dangerous waters.
Well, I mean, I think it's a very powerful argument that you make here. I mean, the fact that in a sense, we, when it comes to Russia, we really had to go through a fairly long sequence of fairly obvious signs. And it really took 2022 to wake up. And so kind of using that analogy to other parts of the world, you wonder where we are in that sequence when it comes to other parts of the world. Because, of course, one of the reasons why we let that sequence happen was that we couldn't agree amongst ourselves throughout that sequence. And that's why we didn't have a strategy fundamentally. And in a sense, that's exactly the case when it comes to the Sahel. It's exactly, I mean, when it comes to the Sahel, we're in this kind of, rather, I mean, we kind of use the argument of, well, you have always said, African solutions to African problems. And all we have to do is support that. But hey, if there isn't an African solution, then we just do nothing. And as you said, in a sense, that is abdicating on having a strategy, right? I mean, you're basically kind of delegating to someone that doesn't have one the fact that you support a non-strategy that someone else is supposed to be developing. So in a sense, there aren't the parallels being drawn. I mean, at the same time, you kind of think of the I think there is an objective difficulty. I mean, I kind of struggle to get my head around it because, as I said, I think in the case of Ukraine, so we know we need to bolster our defense. We know we need to equip our defense industry to support Ukraine and support Ukraine developing its own defense industry to engage in a long war. We know we need to do enlargement. We know that this will require different types of reforms, especially as far as, the budget and agriculture, etc. So at least we know what we need to do, which doesn't mean to say that we're going to do it, yeah, but we know what we need to do. Indeed, I mean, beyond the fact that we can't agree when it comes to other parts of the world, the truth is there? I mean, think about the Sahel. What is it exactly that we could be doing that we're not doing? I mean, there isn't that low-hanging fruit there. Or, another case that indeed, you mentioned rightly, and I'd forgotten to mention, is Nagorno-Karabakh. I'm not a big fan of his, but, Charles Michel did try to mediate. I mean, we were never going to sort of, put troops on the ground to prevent Azerbaijan from, retaking Karabakh. In a sense, after 2020, the writing was on the wall. And in any case, it would have been a little bit odd doing it, given that in principle we support Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. Yeah. So what were the instruments that we had? So in a sense, I think in the case of Nagorno-Karabakh, I think in the case of the Sahel, there's, I think, a real problem of actually not knowing what to do. In the case of Karabakh, I think there's a problem of an objective lack of, in an ideal world, we would have been happy to see Azerbaijan's territorial integrity being reestablished and prevented ethnic cleansing. Thanks very much. And we didn't have the instruments to do that. And then you think of Israel-Palestine, where there I actually do think it's a real problem of political division, of having the instruments within Europe, having the instruments, because we do have instruments. We're just unwilling to use them because we're divided amongst ourselves. And in a sense, I think one of the reasons why we avoided talking about it throughout these years was not just because we bought into a narrative which obviously turned out to be completely wrong, i.e. that there was no problem, but also because we were dead scared that had we reopened that discussion point, those divisions would have emerged, really.
Well, one point that I thought that I would like to start with a bit about Ukraine, that I think that the way that we've entered the war was with not the mindset was not about the victory or loss. Now it's a bit changing, and now people start considering the possibility, and there was a commentary by previous chief of defense, chief of the army of US, Milley, why he said, the Putin's victory would be inconceivable for the West. I mean, that would be the hugest, the biggest problem that we can imagine. We've been saying this. But this is, again, part of this reawakening and understanding of where we are. So how did we enter the war? We entered the war, and we're still, in the stage of escalation, de-escalation. What it means to escalate, and how do we de-escalate, and how do we not escalate overly, and so on and so forth. So we're not in this for victory, right? We have not been in this at the beginning for victory. With that in mind, you have to understand that if, for example, in my country, the understanding between the people is very clear. If Ukraine does not win, we might be next. That's why the support for Ukraine, the effort, we're spending people would say, look, for you to spend 2.7% of your GDP to your defense, you're a small country, small economy, so that's not a lot of money. The thing is that the way the percentage works, so it's the same percentage of the money that we could rather be spending on the teacher salaries, on healthcare, on something else, the percentage works the same in Italy or in Lithuania, in US or in Lithuania. So if we manage to spend 2.7, that means that we managed to convince our people that this is a big problem, and we cannot spend the money elsewhere, or shouldn't be spending the money elsewhere. That doesn't mean that we don't have, social issues, social pressures, that the money could be used elsewhere. But the understanding is that we're in this,
it's existential.
It's existential. So the question is not there. We have to spend it, and we wish we could spend more, and probably we'll get there, earlier than later, sooner than later. But without this existential understanding, then you have a problem of convincing your people why to support the effort, right? And this is why you get tired. This is why you're so worried that the election might change the whole cycle. And so this is a problem. And when I look back, some of the other wars that happened, like first Iraq War, really springs into my mind, where when the West, the coalition, which was a wide coalition of Middle East and Western countries, had to defend Kuwait, but it was enough that we found enough arguments to explain that this is existential. This has to happen. Obviously, think tanks and then media explained it, that look, there might be some additional arguments, not just defense of a small country versus a big country, but even then we managed to convince that this is essential. We have to do it. this is important, and we'll do actually what it takes. And we did. And Kuwait won, and Iraq lost.
Yeah.
Now it's not that. Now it's not that. So obviously the people will get tired. I mean, if you're not explaining that this is existential. So this is there's this huge difference. Now about the instruments of what we have. Yes, the divisions are there. They're always there. But I would, one of the questions that I'm usually asking when we're debating the answers towards, certain political events is how many instruments do we have? What kind of instruments? What sort of instruments? And I think that currently, we have sanctions as European Union, which is a very tough, heavy weapon to handle. Very difficult to calculate what is the right answer. There's always a price for us on a downside, and difficult to reach a political agreement on this. But just one example. So Armenia and Azerbaijan probably were one of the first countries that I visited as a new minister. So 3 years ago, I went to Ukraine, Moldova, and then Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia. That's usually our policy directed to the east, and we usually do that. One of the things that we presented as an idea during the meeting and after the meeting was the UMM mission for Armenia to patrol the border with Azerbaijan. That was not in the papers. That wasn't nowhere, because we just had an example of Georgia that it works.
Yeah.
This is European presence, and this is. It's not hard power, but it's not completely soft. So it's somewhere in the middle, which is, a very European thing to do, and a step in the right direction. It took 2 years to get this idea operational. I mean, and now it's there. And actually, I think that it's useful. Now, we're advocating to have it doubled, and because they're monitoring, they're reporting, they're there, and I think they're tremendously useful, but it's just one example. There could be a number of those, and I wouldn't think of good examples apart from this right now, but they're ample of ideas to be geopolitical. We have to understand that, for example, Armenia now is they've always been in a very tough position. Now they're in tremendously tough position because of geopolitics, because of their dependence on Russia, which is obviously absent as a security guarantor, probably even, have different agenda in mind, which might not necessarily be linked with Armenian security. So what is European interest? Do we want to see, vibrant democracy, actually strong, able democracy surviving? Or would we sit through them not just facing problems, but maybe fall and say, yeah, maybe we could have done something. So I think we do have instruments to support the democracy there currently.
Oh, if you asked me, I mean, if they were interested, I would give them a nod and a wink saying that we would be open to, sort of
I think that
take the accession process to Armenia as well.
I think that they are interested. I think that they are interested. They, very well understand the situation that they are in. Geopolitical regions breed geopolitical people, and they very well understand that. They definitely do not have this contention of safe world, post-historic environment. Definitely not. They're very much writing their own history right now, and they want it to be safe for them and their children. That is completely understandable. So, but this is the point where we could start writing the instrumentarium of what we are able to do. Some of it is in the hands of the Commission. So the Commission can take the lead and then should take the lead. Some of it is in the Council, obviously, which is where the things could get more difficult. But not necessarily possible. Some of the instruments could be, as UMM, we managed to find an agreement, we managed to finance it, it's there, it's working, and it could be expanded. So obviously this is not silver bullet to save the region, solve all the issues that have been there for hundreds of years probably, but it's to present the presence and and be there for the stability actual stability of the region.
Yeah.
So that's probably what I can provide, is the direction of the thinking that could drive us.
I wanted to say something about victory and defeat, but then I wanted to ask you two quick questions before we open up on the. I think it's important, especially here in Rome, with an Italian audience, to make this point about victory and defeat again and again, in the sense that I think that here there is still in public debate this idea that there is a compromise world out there. And I think that fundamentally misconstrues the nature of this war. If this were war like sort of a secessionist war, a civil war, war in the Balkans. I mean, these kinds of wars indeed tend to end with a fudge. This is a different kind of war, and I think you aptly kind of used the first Gulf War as an example. It's a war of one country invading another. It's an imperial war, right? These wars don't end with a fudge. These wars end with either one side or the other side winning or losing. And so, given that losing has the existential repercussions that you were referring to, the only other alternative option is winning. But I think this really is a point that needs to be made again and again, because the further you go away from the front line, and the weaker this understanding, I think, is. But the other two questions before we open up that I wanted to ask you was first a very immediate term question, because it has to do with what happens in 3 days' time, rather in 2 days' time, meaning Poland, and what your sort of, how do you see this playing out? Sort of, I'm not asking you what you think the election results are going to be, but if, let us assume that there is some sort of continuation of what we've had up until now. Do you think that the signals that we've been hearing during the election campaign will die out, and ultimately Poland will return to what its national interest is? Or do you actually see, I mean, I'm assuming that in the event of an second, to add to the concern is obviously something, I mean, a massive elephant in the room that we haven't even mentioned, which of course is called Donald Trump. What is it? Again, we don't know whether this is going to happen or not, but, it's only wise to assume that it could. And so what is it that we need to be doing now to Trump-proof Europe?
About the first comment that you made regarding the imperialist ambition of the country, I could not subscribe more. I mean, it's probably seen throughout my comments that this is indeed the way that we see the war. When somebody talks about the negotiations, I kind of tend to joke. It's like discussing a dinner's menu with a cannibal, when the menu for him the menu is you. And then you have to decide basically what you want to eat, and it's very difficult to find a compromise really on this when basically you're on the menu. So we can expand on this maybe later. Now Poland, I would not go into elections. I would probably I might have a privilege of knowing some of the Polish people thinking, which in many cases is very similar to ours. That for the country, the understanding of existential threat that Russia is is in their bones.
Yeah.
Is as part of their DNA, same as for us. So I think that putting politics aside, Poland will be fighting the good fight. Whatever the outcome, whatever the outcome is. It really is unsettling, some of the statements that are being made, but we try to look past them into the psyche, so to say, of the society. And it's a very historic society, incredibly historic, even probably more than we, and history frames them in the good and the bad ways. But when it comes to the geopolitics, definitely they will be on Ukrainian side. That's my belief, and this is what I'm counting on after the election, whichever way it would turn.
That's
now
very reassuring.
Yes, this is what we are trying to think, and I think obviously election time could influence some of the statements that happens everywhere in the democracies, but I still think that Poland, and then again, so many countries look up to Poland in the region. We in the Baltics, in the broader Nordic and Baltic region, in the eastern flank. Poland is an incredibly important partner, geopolitical partner, a regional partner. So there's a lot of responsibility on that as well. So I think that, and in most cases, in most of my conversation, this is understood and valued. Now, when it comes to US, obviously that's when you close all the doors, that's the main subject that most of the European politicians would talk about. I don't think that there's an easy answer. I don't think that there's one answer. We have to be prepared that that democracy is democratic, as they say. So it can go either way. We have to be prepared for any eventuality. Our thinking is quite simple one, that I don't think that we've tried yet all the instruments that we have to offer our debate and our thinking, as with many other cases. We look, since, and you mentioned that, since the beginning of war, we suddenly decided and understood that, look, we need global partners on our side. And it's a bit, it's a bit strange that we woke up after so many years, right? And we, I've joked this even with some of our Indian colleagues that how many visits do you have now currently compared to the years previously, and they were like, yeah, India was there for 4,000 years. You could have chosen any time to visit us, but now suddenly you all find out that we need India on our side. So obviously it puts us in a more disadvantaged position because it raises the price of anything that we're asking and so on and so forth. So it's better to do it in smaller steps, but do it constantly. Understandable. We do it. I think that we started offering our narrative and ideas, which are honest and beneficial to the society, the global side, not just the West, to the global partners. This has happened. But then, for example, and this is what we're trying also to do in some cases, that, for example, narratives in southern part of Europe and northern part of Europe, they might differ. Understandings might differ, and we need to continue explaining, where we are about the existential aspects of war against Ukraine and so on, but taking into account, for example, southern Europe's understanding of what the migration issues, could be, what the Northern Africa is, because we really are further away, and I have to admit, the narratives are just not reaching us in the way that they are prevalent here. But same goes for the United States. One thing is to travel to Washington and to meet the people who are extremely like-minded. You sit down, you talk, we shake hands, we see the world the same way. Good for you, good for us, okay. And we travel anywhere else. But there are so many people who might win election, who are in the States, who are reading different kind of media, who are watching not CNN, Maybe they're watching Fox, maybe watching something even different that we even don't know exists because it doesn't reach us in any way. So, you know, I said, you know, if there's a global South, you know, we have to not forget there's a local as one. You know, the people who are just in the field of different political ideas, different political narratives, they vote in our elections the same way that we have in our countries. It is always best to talk, you know, to come to university where you studied, meet the students, explain what you think, and they would just clap you and say, you know, and they would probably vote for you, and that's it. You know, it's very convenient, it's very easy, it's very comfortable. But you don't do just that. You know, you travel somewhere else where probably your opposition party, you know, usually is winning, and you try to present your argument there, try to convince them, you know, to be on your side, and so on and so forth. So exactly the same process works in foreign, in some of the foreign relations. So our thinking is that we should not forget that we need to win with our arguments people who are not convinced yet. Yeah, maybe it's easier said than done, but at least we need to try this.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's open this up now. Magari, if I do this, let's open this up now. So as people in the room gather their thoughts. Okay, actually, someone has already gathered their thoughts, and then I've got several questions also on online. Yes, Luca.
Go to the mic so that everyone can hear. Also online. Hello, my name is Luca Franza. I'm the head of European Affairs for Edison, one of the leading energy companies in Italy and the largest importer of LNG. And I'd be very interested in hearing your comments on economic coercion. Lithuania resisted it quite successfully. We know that Gazprom was applying specific gas tariffs to the Baltics, and then you opened the Klaipėda LNG terminal. It became so popular that now in the industry we talk of a Klaipėda model. Before even the terminal became operational, contracts actually changed and the prices of gas went down. And also more recently, you resisted quite courageously Chinese economic coercion. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on how Europe as a whole can face this threat going ahead, and how to balance on the one hand, the need to establish economic sovereignty, and on the other hand, the willingness, of course, not to become a protectionist fortress.
Thank you. Well, thank you for kind words. It's nice to
see. There's a Lithuanian model here.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, you know, we used to be proud of that. You know, we had the first LNG terminal in the region. I was, you know, operating very well, building, you know, the knowledge and capacity of the people who are operating it. What now we are proud of is that Lithuanians are running the first German LNG terminal. So it's even, you know, we've expanded into new markets, so to say, which are, you know, what makes us even more proud that the decision was the right one and then timely one, and managed to put us in the right position then to use it also for the commercial benefit, and just the knowledge as a benefit. The reason you mentioned that, you know, we've been paying in 2008, we've been paying the highest price for gas in Europe, not because we're, you know, could not pay it, but I mean it was because it was politically motivated. If the government would make a decision, you know, that Russia would not like, suddenly there's a repair that needs to happen on the pipeline, and that increases the prices. So this is what is happening in some cases. It's absolutely not a new phenomenon. It was there all the time, and Russia was always using this as a tool, you know, to coerce and to pressure countries. So they were quite efficient in this, and we decided to get out of it with, if I'm not mistaken, no assistance from outside, from European Union. We did it on our own. We built it on taxpayers' money. And back then it looked like an exorbitant price. Now it's not so much. I mean, we paid something like 150 million for not just the machine itself, the ship itself, but also for the principle. We can be independent, and you know there's a price tag for independence. So it's always best to pay it and enjoy it, you know, as long as it goes. So that's definitely showed the path, but it also formed a thinking. And a country like Lithuania cannot be dependent on mainly authoritarian countries, or should be diversified when it comes to strategic resources, investments, and whatnot. So we made it one of the core principles of our foreign policy as well, which led us to disagreement with China, and they tried to make a case of Lithuania, and then put also a very strict course of measures to push us from our decision to open a Taiwanese representative office.
Right.
They, for a brief while, they canceled all the trade in and out with Lithuania, and now it's back to normal. I think that
it's back to normal.
It's most of the things are back to normal. Yeah, even exports. Yeah, so our companies are somehow, they're still very much interested in exporting to China.
No, but it's good that it's back to normal in a sense, in the sense that the coercion didn't work.
The coercion did not work.
And it's not like you closed the office.
No. The office is there. The office is there. And as far as I know, they're working efficiently. I mean, and people are quite happy with the results. We have really pushed our relationship with Taiwan, economic relationship, really on a fast track. There is a lot of engagement in several fields, investment and interest and whatnot. But Lithuania's case is an interesting one. Not for, I mean, we might disagree on the principles, whether, like in Australia, so many people would say we would have never started an investigation on COVID reasons, so we would have not faced the consequences that Australia faced. In my case, people would say, why you need a Taiwanese office, we would not do it, and we would not face coercion. China is drawing red lines that are changing. They are inventing new ones, and they will be doing it in the future. So who knows? And Italian government's decision, to tread carefully when it comes to Belt and Road, shows that this is already in there. There is no reason why a country should be sanctioned if they decide to quit something that is not beneficial to them. If Belt and Road is not beneficial, you should just say, I'm sorry, I don't like it. I mean, I'm looking for different endeavors, right? But the cautiousness shows that we have red lines in our mind and we don't want to cross them because, take Lithuania's case, things like that can happen.
But the fact that I mean, I think this is actually, I actually didn't know this either, so maybe others did, but the fact, this is such an important message to give now here in Rome, where indeed this is a big part of the debate. How is China going to react? Italy sort of pulling back from the BRI. Basically, the story that you're telling is keep calm and carry on, because actually, eventually, even if in the worst case scenario, and Lithuania was a worst case scenario in terms of China's reaction, it was not the end of the world and things eventually went back to normal. I think this is such an important message at this point in time.
Absolutely. I mean, what happened with our case? What probably China did not expect. They did not expect global reaction, because my belief is that even though country presents itself as a very pro-multilateral and multi-centric, whatnot, but for them the small is small, big is real, small. So who should care about the country like Lithuania? I've been receiving so many articles like, you're smaller than the region of my city, and we have buildings that are larger than your country size. I understand that, but we are a sovereign part of the world and a global society, and we intend to keep it that way. And suddenly the support was there. course, US support, but then European support, G7 support, so many countries in Indo-Pacific. Okay, so you see that you just cannot bully a small country and expect that, nobody would notice it. So that was one. Second thing, WTO. We might like it, we might not like it, but it's there. It has a panel. And if you want to be part of WTO, you have to answer the questions that you're getting. And it's probably not very, nice experience, because you just have to be there, or you can quit. But if you don't want to quit, then you have to behave. So I've had so many questions, like people were asking, okay, but it's not efficient. It takes decades and you probably won't have a ruling and so on and so forth. Yeah, but the process is important. The process is important. That Lithuania's case is there. It's being discussed. It's being debated. And this is what makes our, small country sovereignty, visible. This international rules-based environment where we are defended. And we can bring our case forward. Our companies can bring their cases forward. We've been, our shipments have been canceled and all these things. So this is important. And I think that there are a number of lessons out of Lithuania's case. And definitely, I think that giving in to bullying just provides more bullying in the future.
Yeah.
That's the only outcome. And therefore, if there's a lesson to learn in Italy from Lithuania, don't give in to bullying. Just do what you think is in your interest, and that's it.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Yes, please.
So my name is
Where
is this? My name is Diego Ungaro. I'm the Italian ambassador in Vilnius. And just to complete, I'm very thankful to you for organizing the meeting and to the minister for spending some thoughtful time on this geopolitical scenario. But to be back to Lithuania and the model, well, first, let me add that you are pioneering also on offshore aeolic power. And you are creating the first offshore fields on the Baltic Sea. And then, of course, Poland and Estonia and Lithuania will arrive. So energy is on the agenda of the government. I think this is quite important. But my question are two different ones. One is that Vilnius is a little bit a hub for opposition movements and politicians. The Navalny offices moved to Vilnius and are active from there. So maybe a political assessment of how, in a quiet profile, but this works on the hope that opposition in Russia may survive and develop, hopefully. And of course, Belarus, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, and important part of their activities are based in Vilnius, not to mention the huge Ukrainian community, which is very active on economics and social. I think if speaking about models, Vilnius is also a model for the center in support of Ukrainians. It's a very relevant, meaningful place. And last question is, given the fact that the door is closed, can you make your assessment on the Expo 2030? You know that the Italian government is pushing very hard, and Busan is our main competitor. So you spoke about Indo-Pacific and Taiwan and then South Korea. What is your personal opinion? I know the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is not involved in the process, but would be very good for us to take note of your assessment, if you can.
Well, thank you, dear Ambassador, for kind words. It's great to have you here. I don't think it's completely closed doors, right? I think that we might be, yes. So I would, yes. So I would hold on to the decisions that are not yet being made, but I'm sure that it will be quite soon. In a few weeks or so, that Lithuania will be able to announce the decision that we have. For the Expo. It's funny though that it's such an important political question. I thought that in 2030 we would not have Expo as Expo conversation. Yeah, it was 100 years ago. We might have anyway, but I understand that. I'm not questioning it. We will figure it out and announce it publicly. And when it comes to opposition, definitely this is already Vilnius is a hub. There's no other way of saying it. We have a lot of interest now by other countries. How does this work? How do we make people safe? what instruments do we employ, how do we make this all work, because there are really Russians, Belarusians, Ukrainians, everybody living in the city, which is 600,000 people large, so or small. So it's a very interesting environment, and you've experienced it firsthand. But anyway, for us, I think it's a very valued thing that we have, honestly, and also for us as diplomats, it makes our work and possibility to assess the situation that much better. Having the people who have different kind of links to the capitals where they're coming from, and sharing information and so on. So, and it also for them, it creates a society of opposition, freedom fighters, exchange of ideas, because it's such a small city. So if you want to have a coffee, most likely somebody from some other country, opposition, would be sitting not far away from you, and typing down the a Facebook post, a tweet, or a video message or something like that. So this is what's happening, and we're really proud of it. Does not come without its challenges, obviously. Government has to be involved in the process, exactly because of the security of the people. We have to remind that we are just 30 kilometers away from Belarusian border, very, very close. The capital itself, but NATO, our partners, our institutions that we have in Lithuania, help secure the situation so that it's working.
I appreciate we're running out of time, but I don't want to end before I actually also touch on some of the questions that have been coming in online. So I'm just going to take 3 and paraphrase them. So there's a question. I'm not sure whether it's Gri or Gary, maybe, but anyway, let's say Gary. Yeah. Who was asking actually a question about leadership, in the sense that amongst the various problems that we talked about, unity and instruments and strategy, but there is a leadership question in Europe. And so what is your assessment there? There is then a question that actually, interestingly, didn't come up in our conversation, but of course we know is a massive theme concerning Russia, disinformation, and not just quote unquote, sort of what we've been seeing in relation to Ukraine, etc. But, now with this whole much broader global sort of angle to it. And one can perhaps add Elon Musk into the mix. And then a last question from Alfredo Rizzo, who was asking about, essentially, again, sort of paraphrasing, the future of CSDP relationship with NATO, and I guess it's connected also to the transatlantic link question, with or without Trump.
Leadership is an extremely important question, and indeed, most of the problems would be solved differently if we would know who's in lead, who's in charge, or we, as we would call it, who's in the driver's seat. And the world is very, very different from what it was 10 years ago. All the quips and jokes about, who do you call in Europe when you have a problem? Even in Europe, you would call, a leader from Germany, and you would say, yeah, most of the things I figured out, right? Now it's not that world anymore. France is being forced to retreat, right, on so many geopolitical areas where they usually would be in the lead when solving issues or offering suggestions, offering strategies. Germany has a very different type of government currently. And so it is difficult. I would not put blame, because that's the situation, and then it's not because people do not understand it, that there is no they don't want it. Everybody would understand that this is needed, but it's just not figuring itself out at this point. So I think that there is a huge need of then the institutions to step up. I don't see any other way around, at least at this point. We've seen that happening. You mentioned Charles Michel, him taking position in important questions, and I actually absolutely salute it. You know, he was active in Georgia. I mean, Georgian government chose a different path, but we were there. We offered solution, and it was on the table. So it was not for the lack of trying. But we need to somehow get rid of some of the bureaucratic shackles, I would even say, you know, that binds us and constricts us when it comes to institutions, and offer solutions. Yeah, still council will have to debate it, but the process of council debate, solution offering, not on Twitter, please, you know, but somehow still more managed than we've seen during the last couple of days. That's not necessarily leadership, more of a chaos. Yeah. But anyway, the whole process has to adapt to this new reality, which is unfolding in some cases. And FAC, the Foreign Affairs Council, has shown it. We cannot wait for a month or month and a half to meet and discuss, you know, from talking points, when the events just unfold rapidly right now, when we need discussions. And maybe that has to expand also, not just from Coreper, it has to expand to FAC, but also to the council itself, so that leaders could be able to make decisions, because the world situation demands that. And the Commission has to be able to support them in a very, very fast. Now, when it comes to disinformation, truly a very interesting subject. I'm following it very closely. Specifically the last events with Israel and Palestine. I truly commend Commissioner Breton's letter. That was a very good decision. The only tiny question I'm having, could we add also one more letter and ask that the same thing would be done with Russian trolls? Because I know, and I've read that Twitter or X, they are removing you know, the disinformation about the war and about the situation in Israel. And I commend it. It's a good thing. Finally, they're stepping up. But it's already, you know, 1.5 years that this could have happened.
Yeah.
With Russia. So I would very much support this, because it's a major environment for disinformation. Unfortunately, that's a beyond our comfort.
We have all been victims of this.
Exactly. Yeah. And the last question.
CSDP and NATO.
Yes. Look, I think that again, the transformation is happening. My point is that transatlantic link is irreplaceable right now, and we've seen that in Ukraine. Despite the points of view, vision, strategies, it is irreplaceable. And so many, and you could feel it when the vote in Congress for support of Ukraine did not go through. This is where you kind of understood where we are. Like everybody stood for a second. Oh, what will happen next? And then, President Biden calling everybody, calming everybody down. It will happen. Don't worry. That tells you something about the need for transatlantic relations when it comes to security and defense in the wars like the war against Ukraine. That doesn't mean, and I'm not against of Europe getting stronger, but there has to be a change in mindset, first of all, where we have to put our money where our mouth is. We can talk about Zeitenwende, we can talk about commitments that one day we'll be there. We have to be there. And I said that in the beginning. If Lithuania can make 2.7%, others can as well. It's not easy. Trust us, it is not easy for us to explain. We have teacher protests as well in Lithuania right now. They want more salaries, and it's understandable. And the government is trying to figure that out. But we managed to put 2.7 of our GDP for defense. There is no stronger argument for the industry than the money on the table. Nothing. They see politicians, they know elections, they know how this works, they count the money. If the money is not there, the factory is not working. No more shells, no more tanks are produced. If we put money on the table, the factory is not working. And they want to see our money. And until they won't, they won't start. And from industrial capacity goes the strategy for stronger Europe, stronger commitments by Europe, and actually then the commitment, not tearing apart the transatlantic relations, but making more stable, where Europe is playing a stronger part. So I'm for it, but it has to start with the money.
Well, dear Minister, dear Gabrielius, thank you so much for this. I think, to me, my three takeaways, my three words, especially thinking about what is it that Lithuania can usefully I wouldn't say teach, but certainly tell Italy at this point in time. I think is really encapsulated in much of what you were saying, which to me really boils down into three words. The first is clarity. One needs to have that sort of clear-eyed view of where we are, where we want to go, what it takes to get to where we want to go, which then leads to the second word, which is really courage, right? I mean, you need to know what you need to do, and there will be some costs. You're talking about defense. You're talking about incurring the wrath of sort of China as opposed to trolls and all the rest of it. You just need to cut the courage to pursue that clear destination that you have thought about, and the third word is really patience, because of course it is going to be a long walk in the desert, and it's not going to happen overnight, and it's about having the patience to get there and having the patience to bring, because we are democratic societies, the population along with us. So thank you for so much for all of this. It's been incredibly enlightening, and I think in these really dark times, actually, really quite encouraging as well, because I think you have really showed that there is a way, difficult as it is, but there is a way out there. Thank you so much, Gabrielius.
Thank you.